Rated Gen Z, where real talks get real. Each episode dives deep into the minds of 18 to 24-year-olds, exploring their dreams, struggles, and perspectives that most people never hear. We're diving into the chaos that defines a generation everyone talks about, but nobody actually listens to. This isn't just a podcast. This is a generation speaking. If you enjoyed this episode and you're between the ages of 18 and 24 and would like to be a featured guest, go to rock.vision. Until next week. Welcome to the Rated Gen Z podcast, Josh. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I absolutely love this when I have a guest come on and we pretty much have never communicated beforehand just to set this up. And so I don't really know much about you, just a tiny bit, enough to know that I definitely wanted you here on this podcast because I feel like this is a topic that has not been spoken of, especially on my podcast. And I know that it is a very sensitive, maybe even taboo subject. So I think this is great. So on that note, Josh, people are thinking, what are they going to talk about? I'll let you introduce yourself and then we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, my name's Josh Eckstein. I'm from like an hour outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. I'm a high school senior graduating in about a week and a half, 18 years old. I'll be going to college next year. I'm going to Johns Hopkins University. I'm very excited about that. But yeah, so I work primarily in the anti-human trafficking space. And that has been going for about 2 years at this point for myself. And yeah, it's sort of grown and grown. I've gotten more and more involved and sort of starting like headlining and creating more and more initiatives. That work has expanded internationally now, where it's not just in the US, but it's also I'm doing work in Uganda and in Sierra Leone, and I'm working on active trafficking cases in both Moscow and Tunisia right now. And so there's a lot going on. But yeah, I mean, I think we'll get to, specifically what I'm doing, all these different sort of sectors of the field. But yeah, I mean, I do this work because I'm passionate about it, and because if you can make a change, you have the opportunity and the ability to, then that's what I'm going to do. So yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Congratulations on graduating soon. And John Hopkins, that's impressive. The campus is in Baltimore, right?
Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah, that's right. I'm pretty sure I've driven past it. I even think I have like a distant cousin who works there at the hospital. But what are you going to major in?
So Hopkins has a program called Moral and Political Economy, and within that, you do a concentration in kind of a different global issue. So my plan would be to do that program with a focus in labor and migration, international labor and migration, and that would tie really well into what I'm doing now. And sort of could be a pathway to a lot of different things. And alongside of that, I'm going to do a minor in engineering for sustainable development. So sort of having the STEM side and the sort of global issue side. And, at the end of the day, I want to do research and create products that can create jobs for people that need them, that can create safe, non-exploitative labor, while also helping solve a climate crisis. And that kind of combination of study, I think, is the best pathway there.
Incredible. So let's ask you where this all started, because it's not often that you meet people that are in this space. I know some people, but they have to be very secretive about what they do. So I can't really talk about it, but you're definitely the youngest person that I'm talking to about this. So yeah, how did it all begin?
Of course. I mean, I've always had some interest in, wanting to do good. I want to impact the world well around me. And, I have had a lot of blessings in my life and I've had a lot to be thankful for, and I still do. And, I started wanting to make some sort of impact. I go to this school that, I go to like a small private high school that my parents happen to work at. So I get to go there for next to no money, which is a blessing in and of itself. And, I wanted to use my time and use my resources and use, my abilities to make some sort of impact. So, I became the president of a service club on campus and created an activity after school that, is like basically community service 3 days a week, cohort of students going to different nonprofits and volunteering their time. And that was great, but I wanted to do more. I sort of became passionate about wrongful incarceration, actually, and I was doing research there and was finding all these ties between people being trafficked and then being held liable for their traffickers' crimes and then being wrongfully incarcerated. And, I think that's a pretty bipartisan thing. I think we can all agree that is
Yes.
bad. And, I found that fascinating. I was like, okay, human trafficking, it's a big word. Where are the gaps? That's always kind of where I'd like to approach these things from is, I'm not going to try to recreate someone else's solution or do something that's already being done because why not just support someone else's work if you're going to do that? But if there's a gap that can be filled, that if that is filled, it'll really enhance the overall effort in this space. That's where my mind goes. That's where I want to do. And so I started researching into trafficking and I found the gap, and yeah, I don't want to, do you want me to keep talking about sort of
No, I
work
actually want
later?
you to explain what human trafficking is, because I
Yeah.
think there's going to be actually some listeners that are not going to even understand what that means and how that it's even like how it's happening, and
Yeah.
it's happening all over the world. So yeah, please explain it.
Of course. So yeah, the number of people trafficked worldwide is in the millions. And so human trafficking in, layman's terms is the forced, use of another person, the treatment of another person as a good shipment, and then really being forced into labor or sex is really the two major categories. And, when a lot of people hear this term, they're thinking people being, put a pillowcase over your head and being taken into a van. And that does happen. That's real. But that is not all trafficking is. It
More
can be
like
through for
CSI,
yeah, exactly.
like Law and
You,
Order
yeah, you
episodes.
think law and order, but that's a pretty small proportion of what we're talking
Yeah.
about. So that's going to be often through fraud or coercion. People can have their drug addictions leveraged against them to be trafficked. You get hooked on a drug by your trafficker, and then, addiction is a powerful thing, and you can use that to leverage someone into doing things, at your command, essentially. That's modern slavery, is what we like to call human trafficking in this field. Or, it can be through the use of your immigration status. If you don't have any other working options and you need a way to support your family, support yourself, put food on the table, that is a form of coercion. If you're using that against someone to leverage sex or labor, that is coercion. You can utilize someone's documents. If you have ownership of someone's ID or passport against them for trafficking, you can threaten someone's family. You can pose as someone over online. This is a growing thing as the internet becomes more prevalent, as a potential love interest or a potential employer that seems to be a way out of someone's awful situation, whether that's familial or anything else. And then once they're there, the situation gets worse, and you're sort of slowly brought into and inducted into this really imbalanced and power imbalanced relationship. And then we also have a lot of familial trafficking, especially in the United States, where children and adults are being really trafficked and forced to do things and used by their own families. So, it's a pretty broad umbrella term, but overall, what we're talking about is really modern slavery and people being used as objects for either sex or labor. And yeah, it's a huge field where there's a lot of people trying to do different things and on different sides, and everyone has the same goal. But yeah, I don't know. Does that work for you as an explanation?
Yes, it does. And it also shows that it isn't as simple as someone
No,
just kidnapping you on the street. I mean, we have seen video footage, actual footage of people being taken from their cars, but there's
happens.
also the scenarios of kind of more of the manipulation and the blackmail and all of those. So it's not just like, black and white. There are a lot of nuances to it. And so I feel like the more that people understand it, then the more that people can maybe even acknowledge like if it's around them. Because I do
Yeah.
feel like have been situations where it probably was happening underneath your nose somewhere and you just didn't weren't able to see the signs or anything. Because I do see like at airports, now in the bathroom stalls, you have like, hey, if you're being trafficked, like call this number. Or now there's like signs that you can do, right? Like if you're on an airplane and you're
Hmm.
being trafficked, like, so I know that there's things that are happening that are becoming more mainstream public, if you will, but I feel like there still is a lot of ignorance around it. But, and I don't fault people for that because
No.
it is a very kind of scary thing to acknowledge, right? Because a lot of people don't want to believe that there's horrible people in this world that would do that. So I think
Yes,
sometimes it's being in denial, if you will.
for sure. And I mean, even beyond that, I mean, just people have a lot going on. And so
Yeah,
it's unrealistic to expect people to have the time or the ability to do research on all this just on their own time and out of their own motivation. Like,
yeah.
people have lives and have just a lot going on. And so, we do need people in the space that can actually advocate and can push this information out so that people have the information they need, whereas it probably won't be out there if we're just putting the onus on general citizens to be informing themselves.
Yeah. But have you found just now that you're in this space that a lot of people that are in it, that are working, that they themselves have personal experience from it, or are there a lot of people like yourself that just want to do good and want it, and this is kind of what they found to be something
Yeah,
that they're passionate about? I'm just curious on that end if you do find a lot of people that have been through it that are now on the other side trying to help.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it, there's definitely some of both in the space. There's some people like me who want to help, and there's a ton of trafficking survivors that are now, have gotten out and are now trying to help others and are trying to make this end. And I mean, really, one of the biggest pushes and one of the most important things in this space is that we're really trying to make it a survivor-led initiative and a survivor-led movement. No one, not me or anyone else that hasn't had the lived experience, can truly speak to it or what it is, even act like we know what is best to stop it in its tracks. We can be facilitators of solutions and we can push and we can put in the work and we can be there. But at the end of the day, it should be and needs to be led by survivors. And, we need to compensate survivors for their input. Consultancy should not be free, especially when you're working with someone who's gone through this. They should be compensated fairly for their efforts. And everything you're doing should be really survivor informed at the very least, because that's how you know it's going to be effective.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. For instance, I have a mentee here in San Diego, and she went through the foster care system and group homes, and now she's part of this nonprofit and they have an advocacy for change program within the nonprofit. And so you have all of them trying to create change. And she'll be on the podcast and she'll talk about it. But yeah, I feel like it has to be people that have the lived experience to be really able to understand what it's like. But at the same time, it's important to have people like yourself. So, like you said, kind of coming together, bridging the gap, figuring out where you guys, I guess, need to do more. But I do agree that it should be a survivor led for sure, because they're the only ones that can really understand.
Yeah.
Have you had a lot of contact with survivors with what you're doing, or are you
Yeah.
pretty far removed right now so far?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, everything I do is in direct collaboration with survivors. No Trafficking Today, which was my first organization that was starting, in my junior year of high school and was still running now. The entire information base was built with trafficking survivors. I paid consultancy fees out of my own pocket, using a job at a local farm. Everything I do has constantly been work with survivors, and there's some great people that I can connect you with, honestly, if you're looking to have some of them
Yeah,
on the podcast. But I
absolutely.
mean, yeah, especially for me who was, just starting out in this work and was looking to learn and, didn't know a ton when I started out and sort of gained information and gained expertise over time. And I'm still learning. Everything was sourced from survivors and me taking that information and seeing, okay, how can I put this together with the other things I'm able to do and other strategies to actually create a solution.
So let me ask you this, because you're young, you're 18, and being that you have direct contact with these survivors, you've had to hear their stories and their experiences. Was there ever a moment when you thought, okay, this might be a little too heavy and maybe I'm not equipped emotionally to do something like this? Or was it the opposite where it maybe like fueled this thing in you where, you get so upset and angry hearing the stories that, it just drives you even more? Like, I'm curious if you ever had moments like that, because it is, I'm sure, very heavy at times.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a lot for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, people have gone through a lot, but I think the way I usually approach it and the way I come out of those conversations, and those are pretty frequent conversations for me, is like sort of a sense of responsibility of I haven't had this and I have a way to help. And like, of course I'm going to after I hear this, and I never want this to happen to a single other human ever again. Like yes, it's heavy and, yes, I'm young but I've gotten myself to a place where I feel able to take on that and handle that from, an emotional, socio-emotional perspective. And so it's really just like I never want this to happen to another person again. And I feel like I see ways where I can contribute to that fight. So like every conversation is like, yes, I need to keep going.
I do admire and respect people like yourself so much. You don't need to be doing this. I mean, how do your parents feel about it?
I think it confuses them sometimes. I
Okay.
mean, they're supportive. I mean, I'm thankful for them. They're incredible. They, I think, sometimes feel that it's early to be doing all this, that, I am in high school and, I'm
Yeah. Like,
graduating
how do
now,
you
but
know that this is what you want in your future already?
yeah,
Like,
how
how
do
can
I
you be that
know?
determined already to
Yeah,
do this?
how do I
Yeah.
know? Am I sure I want to, put this much time into it, put this much effort into it? Should I not be a kid? I mean, I am a kid, but just enjoy my time and
Yeah.
enjoy high school and get to all this later, if ever. Not put pressure on yourself to, save the world. Just be a person and enjoy that. That's great. And I think they're not necessarily wrong. I would never begrudge anyone else for making their own choices. I have only had my own experience. I've only had the things, the exact set of events that have led me to where I am right now. And that's led me to my mindset and what I think I want to do and what I'm doing now. My mindset is that I have the ability to help so many people have had so much. If there is an opportunity to help, you do. That's just where I come from. But that's only from my own perspective. And so I'm never going to begrudge anyone else. But that's my decision.
Yeah. Well, I will have to say that I'm 49 and my parents are still confused about what I'm doing, and they'll always be my parents and they'll always be, concerned and want the best for me. And so, yeah, they themselves also kind of don't really, they're starting to get it more and more, but they're also kind of like, what are you doing? Because I left my corporate job. Like I had a good corporate job making a good salary and everything. And I left it all so that I could pursue this. So just so you know, it doesn't matter that you're 18. You can be my age and still have people going, what are you doing? I hope that makes you feel a little bit better. But yeah, it is. I feel like we are now with your generation seeing that the possibilities are huge and you can do things that are outside of the box and you can do things completely differently. And so I think it's just hard for our parents and some of the older generations to kind of understand that. I think as we progress and evolve, like it'll be different 10 years from now.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. I mean, at this point, you've been speaking to a lot of people in my generation.
Yeah.
You're both younger than me and older. What are sort of the trends you're noticing, sort of as the conversations pile up?
That you guys want to be able to change the world for the better. And you guys have so much hope. And I tell these adults, I'm like, do not diminish their hope. Do not. Like, if they have hope, then it gives me hope. Like, that's what I find is that, because like I will tell you this, I don't know how old your parents are because obviously you're much younger than me, but my parents were baby boomers. And so the 70s, 60s, 70s, Woodstock, everything. And my mom says it all the time. She goes, we thought we were going to change the world, peace, love, all of it. And a lot of those baby boomers are now like probably the most conservative, most like the extreme of what they were at that time. So I think she gets a little skeptical, kind of being like, well, we tried to change the world and look, we couldn't. But again, it doesn't mean that you guys can't. Now with all this information and all this technology and social media, who's to say that maybe it is possible,
I think it's easier to make a large impact than ever before.
Yeah,
There are more tools to connect people all over the world, to impact people that you've never met in person. In some ways, the tech is catching up with the drive of people to help everyone else. There's also
yeah.
some worries about technology advancements too,
Well,
of
yeah, the
course.
AI, everybody's talking about AI right now, and just that's advancing like crazy too. And that I'm sure because of that, you see this human trafficking in a way that, I mean, like you said, people get online and they can easily fake who they are in a
Yeah,
second.
international trafficking is becoming, their methods of trafficking are changing really quickly.
Really?
Um, yeah, and I mean, AI stuff and deep faking now is even involved in that as well.
That's
But I
right.
mean, my mindset with it is that AI is simply a powerful thing, or this is what I hope at least, but it's powerful and can be harnessed for good or for evil. And there's already some both that we're seeing. And yeah, I just hope that as we continue to see that, we are mindful about how we use it and we
Yeah.
don't simply rule it out or try to move backward because that has never worked before. Advancement will happen,
Yeah.
but instead we try to use it for the best ways possible. I use AI in my work now, and I'm seeing the ways that it can be helpful, but we'll see.
You were speaking earlier about like bridging that gap. So I want to talk about what is the biggest gap that you see right now that you are trying to bridge.
Interesting. Can I talk about two? Is that all right?
Absolutely. You can talk about 5 million if you want.
The in the United States particularly, and really all over the world, but there is publication of hotlines and who do you call if you see trafficking, right? You see them in bathrooms and
Yeah.
airports and in train cars and things like that. I believe that is not enough, and that we also need existing resources being promoted on these systems, public transit, motels, etc., that provides accessible information on trafficking avoidance and identification. Simple steps to identify trafficking schemes. What is human trafficking? Because many people won't know. How to avoid alternatives for you if don't have immigration status or things like this, for vulnerable groups and vulnerable situations that would lead to trafficking. What are your alternatives? What are your local nonprofits that may be able to help you, provide you safe housing, things like that? And then if you do identify a trafficking situation, how do you help? What do you do? What is your next step? And then finally, if you are in a trafficking situation, what can you do? Because for a lot of these individuals, getting on the phone and calling a hotline may really just not be realistic. If
Yeah.
you're under the eye of your trafficker, you can't be speaking on the phone, but you can maybe read something. And then in terms of accessibility, translating all that information with native speakers into a variety of languages and dialects so that it's accessible to everyone instead of, not everyone's going to have the time for Google Translate. It sounds silly, but that single step could be the difference. And then providing audio options for every translation so that literacy is not a barrier either. These are simple things, but these little things could be the difference, and it could save real individuals. That was what my first step was, building out that information base, working with professors and survivors to really put together that set information. And now the site is up, it exists, and we're trying to get it picked up right now in a variety of cities all over the US. And we're expanding that to Sierra Leone now to build out a separate information base for Sierra Leone and promote that all over as well. But yeah, that's the first one, and I that's been one that I've been working on for a while. And then as I've been involved in more and more trafficking cases that are active, working as a case leader and working to actually remedy these active cases, I have seen the I mean, look, there are people all over the world that are doing incredible work, but it is a slow process often, especially when you're working in international cases. And I believe that if there was an international database of local actors in the anti-trafficking space, both legislative and in the legal field, and then also on the grassroots level, as well as information on trafficking statistics for specific demographics in each locality, that could go a huge way in being able to be more efficient in solving these trafficking cases. And that's what I'm working on right now. We're working to get funding for this database. And, it ties back to AI, because this trafficking research of getting these trends in all these different localities, for this demographic, for people being trafficked from Sierra Leone to Tunisia, we don't have the research. It's expensive to do and it's hard, and you need to be very sensitive when you're doing anti-trafficking research because of the experiences that your subjects have gone through or are going through. That's a really difficult process. But as more cases are entered into this database, an AI tool could theoretically analyze them and be able to provide instantaneous trend analysis for any demographic you want to see. If that's a public facing platform, all of a sudden information on trafficking is way easier to understand. And you can see how it applies to you and your specific age, demographic, nationality, religion, anything else. And all of a sudden it becomes more personalized, which is the way I think maybe it could go.
Yeah. Once it's personal, then it's different, right?
100%. And
And that's
yeah,
what's so important. So yeah, I love that you were talking about that aspect of it.
yeah. And look, trafficking is a major problem and no one solution can fix everything.
Right.
This could make an impact even just in terms of when I'm running cases, a lot of times I'm trying to make connections over LinkedIn to get people that I can work with in this town, in this specific country, because you need people on the ground that can help.
Yeah.
But if there's a database of verified professionals that are trustable and have already signed up to be contacted for this kind of thing, it just becomes a really faster process and that saves precious time. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you this is a business model that is profitable, incredibly profitable for traffickers.
Yeah.
And so you need to treat it as reducing the supply and reducing the demand and, make it harder and, really more dangerous for people to like really reap the fruits of trafficking, and whether that's being a buyer or being a trafficker itself, impact legislation to be stricter and be harder to get past, less loopholes, and then reduce supply by not just telling people to not, don't be trafficked, don't do it, stay away from people that are offering dangerous situations, but actually give them other options, because people like trafficking is not an isolated thing where people are just saying, you know what I want to do today? I want to go, like, it is due to a lack of options and a lack of information. And so if we make rehabilitation better, we reduce re-entry and we make it more empathetic so that people aren't being re-trafficked so often. And if we make all these systems that are interconnected with trafficking, whether that's labor law and that is immigration systems and rehabilitation for drug addiction, all these different things, child support, foster care systems, everything, LGBTQ plus support, like these are all interconnected issues. But that's how you reduce supply, by making it easier for people to have a better option that isn't so dangerous.
Yeah, because I do feel like a lot of it does come out of desperation. It is a broken system. There's a lot of broken systems, but we got to do something and we got to start somewhere, and it's not going to just fix itself overnight. It's getting to the core of like who we are and why we want to be seen, heard, validated, all of these things where a lot of these people are not getting that. It is a complex thing, but
Yeah.
I do feel like we need to be better at going down to the core and then starting with everybody at a young age. Because, I say this all the time, especially our country, we're a very reactive country. We're not proactive. And I find that your generation is trying to be proactive, like understanding that, yes, you're young, but you're like, hey, I got to start at some point somewhere and might as well start when I'm young.
No, I mean,
Y-
trying to look, we need some reactive solutions. We need rehabilitation. We need safe housing. We need everything
Yeah.
for people that have already been affected by issues. But it also requires looking at the roots of these
Yeah.
issues. Where are they coming from so that they stop happening in the future? You need both.
Yeah.
I hope that's what we're all trying to do. I think it is.
I think it is. And
Yeah, and I mean, I can promise to anyone listening right now, if you have ever taken the train or the bus, chances are you have sat very near to someone that was being actively trafficked. Like you have met someone before that has been going through this. It just, you didn't know. But yeah, I mean, I can definitely connect you with someone that, is Gen Z and has gone through this and is a survivor. I mean, because they're the ones that need this platform and can do the best with it.
yeah.
I can do my best, but they're the ones that need to have the platform.
Yeah. And they're the ones too that need to help destigmatize it, right? Because same
Mhm.
thing with my mentee, Katie. There is a stigma around being a foster care youth. I
Yeah,
mean, to have this narrative around that there's something wrong or, like their future isn't going to be as bright as anybody else, I think it's really effed up.
we are all humans that have just had different experiences happen to us. The experiences don't define who you are.
Exactly. And so in that case, I feel like it is a sensitive topic, but it needs to be spoken about. And if we're going to do something about it and change things. And so I appreciate you being so just forthcoming. We'll start closing this out. So if there's anything that you want to share that we haven't spoken about, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to wrap up, I mean, look, everyone has their own set of things that they're facing, and some more than others, and everyone has their own beliefs. I think we can all unify on agreeing that every human deserves fulfillment, community, happiness, freedom, and health.
Love.
And so let's start there. And if you see a way that you could impact, I hope you would, because it needs to happen. And yeah, I mean, get involved if you can. And yeah, reach out if you want to learn more.
Well, good luck with school. I'm assuming that you're like really excited.
I'm excited. I mean, I live in a very small town, like sort of eastern Pennsylvania. So,
Okay.
getting to be in the city for once and things, sort of. move on is going to be nice. It's going to be different.
Yeah, and Baltimore, it's a great city for sports. I don't know if you're a sports fan, but I have been
I'm a
to
basketball
several.
fan, which is unfortunate because they don't have a basketball
I
team,
was gonna
but
say of all sports, that's the one that they don't have. I was gonna
it's
be
the
like
one. Yeah,
Ravens, Orioles. No, what a bummer. Who's your team? Are
I'm
you?
a 76ers fan.
I
Gotta
was gonna
be,
say, yeah. Okay, all
which
right,
is
that's
not a good
fine.
life right now.
Yeah, my dad went to University of Pennsylvania.
Is that right?
Yeah, so Philly is his town, but he's a Yankees fan.
I
Yeah.
actually am also a Yankees fan, so there you
Oh,
go.
are you? Okay, good.
Yeah,
All right. Well, that's going to be fun for you. The Baltimore experience is definitely different than Eastern Pennsylvania. So that's
yeah,
exciting.
a
Yeah.
little bit different than like a little farming town.
Yeah. But you know what? It's going to open up so many opportunities and so many doors for you in ways that like I feel like you can't even imagine right now, which I love for you.
No, yeah, no, it's like an incredible opportunity, and I won't let it go to waste.
I love it. All right, Josh. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I appreciate your time.
If you enjoyed this episode and you're between the ages of 18 and 24 and would like to be a featured guest, go to rock.vision. Until next